Leora did not believe her mate would truly leave her to die until the dust of his riders thinned to nothing against the red horizon. And then there was only the desert, and the heat, and the small, impossible weight of the child beneath her hands. She stood where they had left her, the room all stretched in every direction, a great burning bowl of rust and bone, the sand so bright at midday that it hurt to look at. There was no road, there was no water. There was no shade except the thin blue line of her own shadow, and even that was shrinking as the sun climbed, as if the world meant to erase her by degrees. An hour ago, she had been the Luna of Tavenmore, wife to its Alpha King. An hour ago she had ridden out at her husband's side, believing they were traveling to the border shrine to bless the coming child, because that was what he had told her, and she had wanted so badly to believe him that she had not let herself notice how few provisions they carried, or how Dristan would not meet her eyes. They had stopped at the edge of the sands. Dristan had helped her down from the horse himself, his hands gentle at her waist, and for one foolish heartbeat, she had thought everything would be all right. Then Severine had ridden up beside him, golden and cool and smiling, and rested her hand on his arm, as though it had always belonged there, and Leora had understood. The seers read the pup's birth in the ashes, Dristan had said. He had not raised his voice. He had spoken to her the way a man speaks when he has already decided a thing and only wants it over. A child born of you will burn my house to the ground. I cannot keep you. I cannot keep it. His jaw had tightened. I will not spill pack blood by my own hand, so I give you to the desert and let the desert decide. Dristan, she had hated the smallness of her own voice. I carry your child. You carry a curse, Severine had said softly, and that had been the cruelest part, that it was said softly, almost kindly, the way you might correct a servant. Be grateful he gives you to the desert at all. They had taken the horses. They had taken the water. They had taken the cloak from her shoulders so she could not even shield her face, and then they had turned and ridden back toward the green country, and not one of them had looked back, not once, and Leora had stood in the sand and watched the only life she had ever known disappear into the shimmer of the heat. She did not lie down. That was the one thing she would not do. She had been the unwanted one her whole life, the foundling Luna, with no bloodline anyone could name, taken in by old Alpha Norvane, out of pity, and married off to his son, to settle a debt of honor she had never understood. She had spent 24 years making herself small, useful, quiet, so that no one would remember they had every reason to be rid of her. And in the end, they had been rid of her anyway. But the child did not deserve the sand. So, she walked. She did not know which way. She walked toward the lowering sun because walking toward something felt less like surrender than walking toward nothing, and she kept one hand pressed flat to the swell of her belly, and she talked to the child in a cracked voice so that neither of them would be alone. We are not going to die out here, she told it. Do you hear me? I have decided. I am very stubborn. Your father always said so. He said it like it was the worst thing about me. Her laugh came out as a sob. He was wrong about everything else. Let him be wrong about that too. The sun fell. The light went from white to gold to a deep and bleeding red, and the heat that had tried to kill her all day began at last to lift, and for a moment, just a moment, the room was beautiful. That was when she felt it. Not heat. The opposite of heat, a cold that came from no wind, a stillness that pressed against the back of her neck like a held breath. The hair on her arms rose. The desert had gone wrong in some way she could not name, the way a room goes wrong when someone has entered it behind you. She stopped walking. She turned in a slow circle and saw nothing, only the endless dunes going blue in the dusk, and still the feeling grew that she was no longer the only living thing in all that emptiness. Far off, the sand had begun to move, not blown, but drawn, hissing toward a single point on the darkening horizon, as though the desert itself were leaning toward something. The cold deepened. Somewhere in her chest, beneath her fear, the child went very still, as if it too had sensed the change in the air and was listening. And out of that point came a shape. It walked. That was the wrongness of it, that a thing so large should walk so quietly, that the dying light should bend around its shoulders and refuse to show her its face. As it came nearer, she saw the long, dark coat, the color of dried blood, and the way the sand did not so much crunch under its boots as go silent, and she saw the eyes, and her own breath stopped in her throat. She knew those eyes. Every child in Tavonmore knew them from the stories told to frighten the disobedient eyes, like banked coals, eyes that held a fire that never went out. The demon emperor of Ajmer, Talazar of the Black Citadel, who had not crossed the Rumal into the Wolflands in living memory, whose name the old wives would not say after dark, the monster mothers promised would come for wicked children. The thing the wolves had built their whole northern wall to keep out. He stopped a few feet from her, up close. He was worse, and he was, somehow, also not. He was tall in a way that made her feel like a candle beside a bonfire, and there was a heat that came off his skin even in the cooling dark, a low and constant burning, as if something inside him were always smoldering and never quite consumed. His face was hard and beautiful and exhausted in a way she had no name for. He looked at her belly, he looked at her face. Something moved behind the coals of his eyes that she could not read. Leora did the only thing left to her. She lifted her chin and met the gaze that grown wolves could not hold. "If you have come to finish what my husband started," she said, "then be quick about it, and leave my child out of your appetites." The demon emperor went very still. And then a strange thing happened. The strangest thing in a day, full of impossible cruelties. As he stood before her, close enough that she could feel the furnace of him, the constant fire behind his eyes seemed to gutter, to ease, the way a fever breaks. He drew in a breath as though he had not been able to breathe properly in a very long time. He looked for one unguarded instant like a man who had been carrying something unbearable and had just, against all reason, been allowed to set it down. "What?" he said, in a voice like stone dragged over stone. "Are you?" Leora's legs chose that moment to give out. The day, the heat, the grief, the child, all of it took her at once, and the red sand rushed up toward her. She did not strike it. Arms caught her, arms that burned like a hearth, and held her as carefully as if she were made of glass. And the last thing she saw before the dark swallowed her was the face of the most feared creature in the world, looking down at her with an expression she would not have believed if she had not seen it. He looked afraid. Leora woke to coolness and silence, and the absolute certainty that she should be dead. She lay still, with her eyes closed, and took inventory the way her years in the healing rooms had taught her. She was not in the desert. She was on something soft. The air smelled of cold stone and old smoke, and a sharp green herb she did not recognize. Her mouth was no longer cracked. Someone had given her water. And beneath all of it, steady and undeniable, was the small, insistent flutter of the child. Alive, alive, alive. She opened her eyes. The ceiling above her was black stone vaulted so high it lost itself in shadow. She lay in a bed that could have slept four of her, beneath the window of dark glass, in a room that belonged to no wolf hall she had ever seen. Kareth, she thought, and the name alone made her pulse quicken. The Black Citadel. She was inside the demon emperor's house, which meant the thing in the desert had been real, which meant she had been carried here, which meant you are awake. Good, he has been impossible. Leora turned her head. A man sat in a chair by the wall, long-limbed and dark-haired, with a soldier's stillness and a clever, tired face. He wore no crown and no finery, only a plain dark coat, but he watched her with the frank attention of someone who weighed everything. "My name is Davrin," he said. "I command what passes for the Emperor's armies. And on bad days I command the Emperor, though he would have my head for saying it. You have been asleep for a day and a night. The healer says, you and the child will both live." He tilted his head, She also says she does not understand how either of you survived the Rumal past noon. So we have a great many questions. And you, Luna of Tavanmore, are the most interesting guest this citadel has had in 100 years. I am no one's Luna, Leora said. Her voice came out hoarse. My husband saw to that. Something flickered across Davrin's face. Too quick to name. Yes, he said. We gathered. The riders who left you did not bother to be discreet. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I will be plain, because I have no patience for the other kind of talking. 3 nights ago, the Emperor had not slept, not truly in longer than I care to count. The fire that lives in him was burning him hollow. I have watched him die by inches for a year, and could do nothing. He paused. Then he walked into the desert on a whim none of us understood, and he came back carrying a half-dead wolf woman, and that night, for the first time since I have known him, he slept. Lyra stared at him. I do not understand. Neither do we, said a new voice, dry as parchment. Which is why you are not in a cell. An old woman had come through the door without Leora hearing it. She was small and bent and wrapped in gray, with white hair bound back severely, and eyes that were entirely too sharp for her age. She crossed to the bed and took Leora's wrist between two cool fingers before Leora could object, counting the pulse, frowning at whatever she found. I am Orissa, she said. I read the body and the blood and the things that hide behind both. I have served 3 emperors and outlived 2. And I have spent the last year of my life trying to keep this one alive, and failing. She set Leora's hand down. And then you arrive, and he eases, and I find I am not too old to be surprised after all. Tell me, girl, what are you? A healer's assistant, Leora said. A foundling, a cast-off wife, nothing that should matter to anyone. Orissa pulled a stool to the bedside and sat. Let me tell you a story, and then you will tell me yours. A year ago, the Emperor put down a rising in the southern reach. A city called Vile had opened its gates to his enemies, and he took it back, and in the taking, there was a fire that went further than he meant it to. Many died who should not have. He has not been the same since. Her voice did not soften, but it slowed. Since that night, he cannot rest. The moment he closes his eyes, something drags him to a place that is all burning, and it holds him there, and it does not let him go until he is too exhausted to stand. The fire in him grows. It is eating him alive. I have tried every cooling I know, every draught, every binding. Nothing reaches him. A curse, Leora said, quietly. She had grown up on wolf superstition, but a year of healing work had taught her that the world held stranger things than the pack admitted. Worse than a curse, a wound that will not close, made worse every night. Orissa's eyes did not leave her face. Until you. You were beside him one night and he slept 4 hours. Last night they put you in this room, far from his, and he woke screaming inside the hour. So, we put a chair outside your door, and the moment he was near it, he calmed. She let that sit. Do you begin to see why we are interested, foundling? Leora's heart was pounding. She thought of the desert, of the way the fire in him had guttered when he stood close, of the strange peace that had crossed his ruined face. You think I do this? She whispered. You think it is me? I think, said Orissa, that you carry something that the fire cannot abide. Whether it is your blood, or the child, or both, I do not yet know, but I mean to find out. She rose. We tested it twice while you slept. The first time we walked him past your door and watched the burning in him fall, like a tide, going out. The second time, we took him to the far end of the citadel and held him there, and within the hour he was on his knees with the fire climbing his throat, and 2 of my strongest men could not hold him down. Her face did not change, but her voice dropped. It is not chance, foundling. Whatever you are the first thing in a year that has let that man close his eyes without burning. How long? Leora heard herself ask. How long does he have, if the fire keeps eating him? For the first time, the old woman hesitated. A season, she said at last. Perhaps less. The wound widens faster than it heals. I have buried emperors who lasted longer with arrows in them. She studied Leora with those two sharp eyes. Which is why, you understand, we will not be letting you wander back into the desert. Leora pressed a hand to the child without meaning to. She had come into this room a prisoner, expecting a cell. She was beginning to understand she had walked instead into something far harder to escape, a place where she was needed, and being needed had always been the only chain that had ever truly held her. The door opened a third time, and this time the temperature of the room itself seemed to rise. The demon emperor filled the doorway. In daylight, awake, he was even more than he had been in the desert, all smoldering fire and exhaustion and terrible stillness, and his coal-bright eyes went straight to her as though the others were not there at all. Leora's breath stopped. Davron rose smoothly to his feet. Even Orissa inclined her head. Talazar did not look away from Leora. You will stay, he said. It was not a question. Tonight, and every night, until I understand what you have done to me. His jaw worked. For one instant, the exhaustion showed through, vast and human, and then it was gone behind the stone. I do not ask this. I am not a man who asks. But I will not pretend you have a choice, and I will not insult you by lying about it. Leora looked at the monster who had saved her, who needed her, who could not sleep without her, and understood that she had been thrown away by one king only to become indispensable to another, and that she had no idea yet which of them was the more dangerous to her heart. And if I refuse, she made herself say. The fire in his gaze flickered, and for the second time she watched the most dangerous creature alive look, very briefly, afraid. Then I die, said the demon emperor, and so, I think, does whatever hope is left in this house. That evening, a servant came to lead her to the emperor's chambers, and Leora's mind, traitorous and exhausted and entirely her own, went immediately to the worst possible place. He needs me at night, she thought, climbing a black stair lit by braziers that burned without smoke. Every night, in his rooms, she had been a wife. She knew what men meant when they wanted a woman, in their rooms at night, and the thought of that with him, with the heat that came off his skin and the fire in his eyes, sent a flush up her neck that had no business being there, given that she was widowed in all but name, pregnant, and a prisoner of a creature out of nursery tales. She had worked herself into such a state, by the top of the stair, that her face was burning hotter than the braziers, and when the servant opened the great doors and stepped aside, Leora marched in already speaking, the way she always did when her fear outran her sense. I will have you know, she announced to the room, that I am with child, and recently betrayed, and whatever arrangement you imagine for the nights, I am not the kind of woman who, that is to say, I do not for a husband, and certainly not for. My condition alone should make it plain that I am entirely unsuited to any. She stopped. The demon emperor was standing by a cold hearth on the far side of an enormous chamber, fully dressed, holding a cup of something that steamed, looking at her with an expression of such complete confusion that the rest of her speech died in her throat. To any what? He said. Nothing, said Leora. I misspoke. I speak when I am frightened. It is a terrible habit. The healers despaired of it. He set the cup down very carefully, as if it had offended him. You believe I summoned you here, too. He could not seem to finish it either. A muscle moved in his jaw. I burn the inside of my own skin every hour I am awake. I have not had a full night's sleep in a year. Whatever you imagine I have the strength or the inclination for, woman, I assure you it is sleep. Only sleep. Oh, said Leora in a very small voice. Yes, of course. Across the room, against the far wall, she saw it then. A second bed, narrow and plain, made up with simple linens, set a careful and respectful distance from his own great black bed. Someone had put a folded blanket at its foot and a cup of water on the small table beside it, and the sheer ordinary kindness of it, the trouble someone had taken, undid her more than any cruelty of Tristan's ever had. "I am told you must be near," Talazar said stiffly, watching her look at the small bed. "Orissa believes, the closer you are, the deeper the rest. We will begin with this, and no nearer. You have my word that no harm will come to you under my roof, nor to the child. I may be a monster. I am not that kind of monster." "Thank you," Leora whispered, and meant it past all sense. He looked away, as if her gratitude was harder to bear than her fear had been. She made up the small bed and lay down in it in her borrowed clothes, her back to the wall, her hands folded over the child, and listened to the demon emperor of Ajmar lie down on his own bed across the room. She heard the breath go out of him. She heard him try to be still. And she heard, after a while, the sound she knew too well from a year of tending the sleepless, the small, restless sounds of a body that needed rest and could not find the door to it. So she did the thing she always did. She started to talk, not about anything. She told him about the herb gardens at Tavenmore, about the apprentice who had once mistaken nightbane for chamomile and put half the War Council to sleep through an entire session on grain taxes, about the goat that had eaten the medicinal poppies and walked sideways for 2 days. She told him about the long winter, the river froze, and the children skated on it, on bones tied to their feet, and how she had been too small and too unwanted to be given bones of her own, and had learned instead to like the watching. She did not mean to say that last part. It slipped out the way true things do in the dark, and she went quiet, embarrassed, and waited for him to ignore it. He did not say anything. But the restless sounds across the room had changed, slowed, and she realized he was listening, truly listening, and that no one had listened to her in a very long time. She did not know when his breathing finally gave way. She only knew that at some point the restless sounds stopped, and the great room went quiet, and when she dared to look across the dark, she saw that the terrible fire behind his closed eyes had sunk to a deep and even glow, and that the demon emperor was asleep. He was, she thought, looking at the hard, exhausted lines of his face, gone slack and young in sleep, almost unbearably beautiful, and she should not be thinking it, and she thought it anyway. The fire in him burned low and steady. Lyra let her own eyes close and opened them somewhere else. She stood in a street that was burning. It was night, but the sky was orange, and the air was full of ash that fell like gray snow, and on every side the houses of a great city were going up in silence. No roar of flame, no crash of timber, only the dreadful quiet and the heat and the smell of everything she had ever loved being turned to smoke. The cold she had felt in the desert was here too, threaded through the fire, a wrongness that made her stomach turn. This was not how fire behaved. Fire was loud. Fire was alive. This burned like a memory. The same houses falling in the same way, over and over, a thing that had already happened and could not stop happening. "Hello!" Her voice fell flat into the burning silence and did not echo. Ahead, in the middle of the burning street, a figure stood with its back to her, unmoving, watching the fire the way a man watches a thing he cannot stop and cannot leave. He stood as if he had stood there 100 nights. He stood as if he would stand there 100 more. She knew the set of those shoulders. She knew the dark coat. Talazar. She took a step toward him, and the ash hissed under her bare feet, and from somewhere in the smoke, small and high and impossibly clear, a child began to cry. The emperor did not move. But Leora felt the cry go through her like a blade, and she felt distantly the way one feels another's pain through a wall. The emperor's grief crashed over her so heavily that she staggered, and she understood with cold certainty that this was no dream, that this was a real place, and that something here had been waiting a very long time for someone like her to find the door. In the smoke beyond him, the cold thickened and gathered, and took a shape she could not quite see. It was watching her now. Not him, It had noticed her, and it was pleased. "Talazar," she said again, and reached for his shoulder. He turned, and his face was the face of a man being eaten alive, and behind him in the smoke something was coming toward them, slow and certain, and the child's cry rose higher, and Leora grabbed his arm with both hands and pulled with everything she had. She woke in the small bed, with her heart slamming against her ribs and the taste of ash in her mouth. The chamber was dark and still. Across the room, the Emperor slept on, his face peaceful, his fire low, as though nothing at all had happened. Leora lay in the dark, shaking, one hand pressed to her child, and stared at the sleeping monster, and asked the empty room the only question that mattered. "Where did you just take me?" She did not tell them about the burning city. Not at first. She told herself it was because she could not be sure it had been real, that grief and exhaustion, and a day in the desert could conjure all manner of horrors. But the truth, the one she turned over in the dark of the following nights, was that the burning street had felt like his, a private wound, and she had spent her whole life learning not to touch what was not offered to her. So she said nothing, and a rhythm formed, the way rhythms do. In the mornings, she woke before he did, or tried to, and slipped from the small bed to dress before the Emperor stirred, though more than once she found herself lingering, watching the way the early light moved across his sleeping face, the way the fire in him stayed low and quiet so long as she was in the room. By day, their lives did not touch at all. He ruled an empire. She barely understood, sat in councils, did whatever terrible and necessary things demon emperors did. She kept to Orissa's workrooms, learning the citadel's strange cold herbs, letting the old woman press her ear to the child and mutter about things she would not explain. And by night she returned to the great black chamber and the narrow bed, and she talked the most feared being in the realm to sleep. He was, she discovered, not at all what the stories said. The stories did not mention, for instance, that he was funny, in a dry and buried way, that took her 3 nights to even notice. The stories did not mention that he listened. She had told him that first restless week about the goat that walked sideways, and a fortnight later, in the dark, he had said, "The goat. Did its sight ever return?" And she had been so startled, she had laughed out loud, and across the room she had seen, in the dim red light of his fire, the corner of his hard mouth turn up. Small things began to appear. A second blanket, thicker than the first, folded at the foot of her bed, without a word. A cup of the sweet spiced milk the southern healers gave to women, with child, left warming by the hearth each evening before she arrived. When she thanked him for the milk, he looked at her as though she had accused him of something. "I do not know what you mean," he said, and his ears, she was delighted to see, went faintly dark. She did not press him. But the milk was there the next night too. "You are kinder than a demon emperor has any right to be," she told him one evening, unpinning her hair by the fire. "Do not say that where Davrin can hear you," he said. "He has spent considerable effort building my reputation. You will undo years of work," she laughed, and he watched her laugh with an odd, careful attention, like a man memorizing something he did not expect to keep. It was on the 8th night that he asked her, into the dark, in the voice of a man who had been holding the question a long time, "Why did he leave you there?" Leora lay still. The fire crackled. She had not spoken of it aloud, not once, and the wound was so fresh that touching it stole her breath. "He took a new mate," she said. "Finally, Severine. She is everything I am not. Pack-born, gold-haired, certain of her place in the world." And the seers read the ashes and said, "My child would burn his house down, and Dryston has never in his life been able to tell the difference between a thing that threatens him and a thing he simply does not want." She swallowed. "But he did not leave me because of the seers. Not really. He left me because it was easy, because I was a foundling with no blood to avenge me, and no one who would ask where I had gone. I made myself small for 24 years, so that no one would remember they could be rid of me, and the only thing it bought me was that when they finally were, no one made a sound. The silence across the room was different now. Gone taut. "He is a fool," said the demon emperor. Very low. And there was something in it that was not pity, something harder and warmer and more dangerous. And Leora pressed her lips together and did not answer, because she did not trust her voice. "Go to sleep, Talazar," she managed at last. "Tal?" he said. "What? My mother called me Tal." A pause. "No one has, since I find I do not mind it from you." Leora lay in the dark with her heart doing something complicated and reckless in her chest, and did not sleep for a long time. It was Orissa who broke the spell, as Orissa broke most things, with the truth. But before she broke it, she frightened her. It happened in the workroom on a gray afternoon, while the old woman had her hands laid flat on the swell of Leora's belly, listening with her whole bent body the way she did, longer than usual, far longer, until Leora grew uneasy. "What is it?" Leora said. "What do you hear?" Orissa was a long time answering. "When did you quicken?" she said. "When did the child first move?" "In the desert, the day Dristan left me." Leora frowned. "Because the child is warm," Orissa said slowly. "And it should not be. A wolf pup in the womb runs cool, always. Everyone I have ever felt, cool as riverstone. Yours runs warm as a banked coal." She lifted her hands and looked at them as though they had told her a secret she did not want. "And it answers him. When the emperor is near, the child stirs. When he is far, it sleeps. I have felt it 3 times now." Her 2 sharp eyes came up. "The seers of your pack are fools and cowards, girl. But they were not wrong that this child is something. They were only wrong to be afraid of it. Or perhaps—" She stopped. "Perhaps what?" Leora whispered. "Perhaps they were afraid of the wrong thing," Orissa said, and would say no more. And Leora carried that cold seed in her all the rest of the day, turning it over, unable to set it down. That evening, the old woman said the other thing, the harder thing, in the workroom, with the emperor's shirt open, and her hands on his chest. "It is not enough," Orissa said, frowning at whatever she felt beneath. "He rests, yes. The burning eases when she is near. But it is not reaching deep enough. The wound is still feeding. At this pace, it will outlast the help she gives." She turned her sharp eyes on Leora. "The relief runs by nearness. The nearer you are, the deeper it goes. A room's distance lets the fire crawl back the moment he sinks low. If you want to truly hold it back, girl, you will have to close the distance." Leora felt her face go hot. "How close?" "Hand to hand, at the least," said Orissa, with the bluntness of a woman far too old to be embarrassed. "Skin to skin holds it best of all. I am telling you what the body tells me. What you do with it is your own affair." "Absolutely not," said the emperor, from across the room, with such immediate and total refusal that Leora might have been offended if she had not heard the fear underneath it. "I will not be tended like an infant. I will not have her closer than she already is. It is enough." It was not enough. They both knew it was not enough. It held for 2 nights. On the 3rd, Leora woke in the small hours to the sound she had come to dread. The rough catch of his breathing, the low and broken sound of a man being dragged somewhere terrible. And she saw the fire behind his closed eyes, flaring high and wild, climbing toward the awful blaze of the burning city. She crossed the cold floor in her bare feet, and she climbed onto the edge of the great black bed, and she took the demon emperor's burning hand in both of her own. His fingers closed around hers at once, desperate, crushing, like a drowning man finding rope. And within 3 breaths the wild fire guttered and sank and went soft, and the broken sound stopped, and his face smoothed into the deep unburdened peace she had only seen in glimpses. He did not wake. He held her hand against his chest, over the slow, hard thunder of his heart, and slept. Leora knelt there in the dark, her hand trapped warm against the heart of a monster, and felt something she had no right to feel and no power to stop. a pull, low and deep and certain, drawing her toward him by the bone, telling her in a voice older than thought that she was supposed to be here, that there was not enough contact in the world, that there would never be enough. She knew what that pull was. Every wolf knew. It was the thing the stories promised to people who mattered, people with names and blood and worth, and it could not be, meant for a discarded foundling kneeling at the edge of a borrowed bed. She told herself that, fiercely, the way she had told herself she would not lie down in the sand. Then the child moved beneath her heart, a sudden strong roll, and at the exact same moment, the Emperor's smoldering fire surged once, bright and warm and answering, as though the thing inside him had reached toward the thing inside her. And the Emperor sighed in his sleep and drew her hand closer, and Leora went very still. Whatever was happening here, it was not only her, it was not only him, it was the three of them. And far to the north, though she did not know it yet, in the green country beyond the wall, a rider was bringing Dristan word that his cast-off Luna had not died in the Rumel after all, that she had been seen carried living into the black citadel of his oldest enemy, and that the cursed child the seers had warned him of was still, against all his careful cruelty, alive. A week later, Leora woke in the demon emperor's arms, and for a few warm, half-dreaming heartbeats, before her mind caught up with her body, it was the closest thing to peace she had ever known. His chest was a furnace at her back, burning low and steady, no longer the wild, scorching heat of the desert, but something kinder, a hearth in winter. One heavy arm lay across her, his hand spread open over the swell of the child, as though even in sleep he had appointed himself its guard. His breath stirred her hair. She had slept deeper than she had in years, inside the hold of a creature the whole world feared, and she had not been afraid at all. Then her mind woke fully, and the fear arrived, though not the kind she had expected. She tried to ease away the moment she moved. His arm tightened, and he made a low sound against the back of her neck, and drew her closer, fitting her against him, as if she were a thing he had misplaced, and only now found. Leora bit down hard on the sound that wanted to escape her. She could feel everything, the slow thunder of his heart, the warmth of him soaking through the thin linen, the way his hand had curved, without his knowing it, in a slow and unmistakable claim across the place where her child grew, and beneath all of it, low in her own bones, that pull, deeper this morning than it had ever been. A wanting that had nothing to do with thought, that told her plainly, there was not enough of this, there would never be enough of this, that she had been cold her whole life and had only just discovered there was such a thing as warmth. His breathing changed. He had woken. She felt it in the sudden stillness of him, the way his body went taut, the held breath. For one suspended moment, neither of them moved, and the whole room seemed to wait. Then, instead of letting go, he drew her in tighter, and lowered his face to the curve of her shoulder, and breathed her in helpless, a low sound rolling up from his chest, and then he was gone. He left the bed so fast, the cold rushed in to fill the space he had been, and she heard him cross the chamber, heard the door to his dressing room, shut, not slammed, but closed, with the awful, careful control of a man holding himself on a very short chain. Leora lay in the tangled warmth he had left behind, her heart pounding, her hand pressed to her racing pulse, and stared at the ceiling. She knew what the pull was. Every wolf knew. It had a name, and the name was for people with bloodlines and worth, people the world had wanted and kept. It was not for foundlings dropped on castle steps. It was not for cast-off wives left in the sand. Whatever was happening to her, it could not be that, because that did not happen to women like her, and she would not let herself believe in a thing that would only have one more way to break her when it was taken away. She told herself that, fiercely all through the long gray day. It did not help. She saw him only once from a high window, crossing the inner courtyard far below, with Davern at his side, and the moment her eyes found him her whole body turned toward him like a plant toward the sun, the pull rising so hard and so sudden that she had to grip the cold stone sill to keep her feet. He stopped walking. Down in the courtyard, without looking up, without any way of knowing she was there, the demon emperor went still, his head lifting a fraction as though he had felt her too. Then he made himself keep moving, and Leora stepped back from the window, with her heart slamming, and pressed both hands to her child, and told herself again that this was nothing, that it could not be the thing it so plainly was. That night, the Emberfold was waiting. She slipped into it the moment sleep took her, the way one slips on ice, no time to catch herself. The burning city rose around her, the silent flames, the falling ash, and it was worse now, closer, more real, as though each night she came, she sank a little deeper into it. The cold that threaded the fire had thickened into something that watched. Talazar stood, where he always stood, in the middle of the burning street, his back to her, and Leora walked toward him, through the ash. And this time she did not call his name. This time she followed his gaze. At the end of the street, where the fire roared highest and made no sound, a row of figures stood in the flames and did not burn. Men and women with faces she did not know, their eyes fixed on the emperor, their mouths moving in a murmur she could almost hear. And among them, small, holding the hem of a woman's skirt, stood a child. A little girl, no more than 6 years, with dark hair and grave eyes. And as Leora watched, the child lifted one small hand toward the emperor and reached, the way a child reaches to be lifted, to be carried, to be saved. Talazar made a sound. Leora felt, in her own chest, a sound like something tearing. "Tall," she whispered, and the cold thing in the smoke turned its attention to her. And she felt it, the way you feel a wolf in the dark, deciding whether you are worth the trouble of killing. The flames leaned toward her. The child's reaching hand turned slowly to point at Leora instead, and the murmur of the dead rose into words, and the words were, "Stay, stay, stay with us." And Leora understood with a flood of ice that this place did not only want to keep him, it wanted to keep her too. She seized the emperor's arm with both hands and wrenched, and the burning city tore away like wet paper, and she woke gasping upright in his bed, with ash in her throat, and her whole body shaking. He was awake beside her, sitting up, staring at her with an expression of such dawning horror that her stomach dropped before he had said a word. "You were there," he said. His voice was barely a sound. "You saw it?" "The city," Leora said, shaking. "The fire that makes no noise. The people who do not burn. The little girl who reached for you." She watched the blood leave his face. "Tal, I have been there before. More than once. It is not a dream, is it? It is a place. It is where you go. It is why you cannot sleep." For a long moment he did not move at all. Then he swung his legs off the bed and put his head in his hands. And when he spoke, his voice was flat and final, a door closing. "You will not come back to this bed." "What?" The word came out of her broken. "Tall. No. You do not understand. I can follow you there. I can pull you out. I have done it every time. With this we might be able to. You will not come back to this bed." He stood. He would not look at her. The fire in him had gone high and terrible. "I did not know it was pulling you in. I did not know. I thought you only soothed it from the outside. I never imagined." His hands curled into fists. "Every night you have been walking into the thing that is killing me. With the child, with my child, sleeping under your heart, you have been walking into the fire, and I have been letting you." "It is not your child," she said, stupidly, the only true thing she could find. He went still, then he laughed, a low and ruined sound with no laughter in it at all. "No," he said, "it is not. Forgive me." He crossed to the door and held it open, and the cold of the corridor poured in. "Go, Orissa will find you other rooms, far from me, as far as this citadel allows. Tall, I will not pull you into that place." His voice cracked. Just once, and it was worse than any roar. I have already burned a city of innocents. I will not burn you and the child too. Go, Lyra, it is the only kind thing I have left in me. And because she could see that arguing would only flay him further, and because her own throat had closed entirely, Leora went. The great door shut behind her. She stood in the freezing corridor, with her arms wrapped around her child, and the warmth of him already fading from her skin, and understood that she had finally been wanted by someone, truly wanted, and that he had sent her away precisely because of it. The days that followed taught Leora that there were worse things than the desert. In the desert, at least, the cruelty had been outside her. This was inside. They had given her a fine, cold room in the eastern wing, far from the emperor's chambers, with a window and a fire and every comfort, and she lay in it night after night, and felt the absence of him grow in her like an illness. She had not known it would be like this. She had thought she would simply miss him, the way one misses a fire on a cold night. Instead, her body began, quietly and then less quietly, to come apart. It started with the restlessness, a wrongness under her skin that no amount of pacing could ease. Then came the headaches, splitting and bright, so that Orissa drew the curtains and made her lie in the dark. Then the weight in her chest, as though the air itself had thickened, as though some part of her had been left in another room and was calling to be let back in. She could not eat, she could not settle. Worst of all, the child, her warm, restless child, grew sluggish and still, stirring less each day, and that frightened Leora more than anything that had ever been done to her. "It is the bond," Orissa said, on the fourth day, laying cool hands on her. "Do not bother denying it, girl. I am too old, and you are too sick. It has been forming since the desert, and the two of you have torn it half open, and then walked away from each other, and now it bleeds. He suffers the same in his wing. He has not slept since he sent you away. The fire is climbing. Davrin says he is burning through the nights with no rest at all. Then I will go to him," Leora whispered. "He will not allow it," and the guards answered to him. The old woman's mouth thinned. "He believes he is saving you. He is killing you both." Leora turned her face to the wall and wept, and could not have said which of them she wept for. It was the envoy that broke it open. On the sixth day, a delegation came to Kareth under a flag of truce. Wolves out of the north, and the whole citadel went taut and strange, and Leora, who knew nothing of it, was summoned to the great hall to attend Orissa with the healing satchel, because a member of the foreign party had taken ill on the road. She went leaning on a servant's arm, gray-faced and trembling, and stepped into the high black hall, and stopped. Dresden, Alpha King of Tavenmore, stood at the foot of the dais, her husband, her abandoner, golden Severine at his side in furs, and a dozen wolf lords behind them, and Dresden's eyes found her across the hall, and went wide, first with shock, and then with something colder, something calculating, as he took in the swell of her belly and understood that the child he had condemned was still alive. "So the rumor is true," Dristan said into the ringing silence. "She lives, and the cursed whelp with her." He looked up at the dais, at the demon emperor, seated there in black and fire, and inclined his head with the false courtesy of a man who believes he holds the stronger hand. "Then I have come to the right place. That woman is mine, by pack law, Emperor. Cast out and forfeit, and the thing she carries is a danger to every wolf alive. Give them to me, and Tavenmore will count it a kindness, and keep its spears on its own side of the wall." Leora's vision swam. The hall tilted. The weeks of grief and sickness and the absence of him all rose at once, and the last thing she heard before the black took her was her own name, torn from the dais in a voice she would have known anywhere, ragged and furious and wholly undone. Leora. She did not strike the floor. She came back to herself a moment later, already in his arms, the great hall in uproar, the demon emperor on his knees, on the cold stone with her gathered against his burning chest, and he was snarling, low and continuous at anyone who came near, at the guards, at the healers, at Dristan himself. a sound out of something far older and far less human than a man. His fire had filled the whole hall with heat. His arms around her shook. "You are sick," he said, and his voice broke on it, all his careful control gone to ash in front of his entire court. "You are sick, and no one told me how sick. And you let me believe sending you away would keep you safe." He pressed his brow to hers. "I have been such a fool. I have been the worst kind of fool, Tal," she breathed. Across the hall, Dristan's face had gone the color of old snow, because whatever he had expected, it had not been this. The demon emperor of Ajmar, kneeling on the floor of his own throne room, with a cast-off wolf woman in his arms, as if she were the only thing in the world worth holding. Talazar lifted his head and looked at Dristan, and the fire in his eyes was no longer banked at all. "She is not yours," he said very quietly, which was somehow more terrible than any shout. "She was never yours. You held something precious in your hands and you threw it in the sand because you were too small to see what it was. You will leave my citadel tonight, while my temper still answers to me. And if you come for her, or for the child, you will learn what the wall was built to keep out." He rose with her in his arms, as though she weighed nothing. "Get them gone, Davrin." He carried her from the hall himself, and he did not put her down. That night, in his chambers, with her wrapped in his bed, and her color slowly returning the moment she was near him again, the demon emperor finally told her the truth. "Phile," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed with his back to her, "was a city that opened its gates to men who meant to put a knife in me. I marched on it because every other road had closed. I told myself I would be precise. I told myself a demon of my power could take a city without losing it." His hands hung between his knees. "I was wrong. The fire in me is not always mine to command. Something turned in me that night, something old. And when it was over, the city was ash, and the men who had betrayed me were dead. And so were the women who had not, and so were the innocent who had never betrayed anyone in their lives." Leora lay still and did not interrupt. "There was a child," he said, and his voice went very strange. "A little girl. She had run into the street, away from her mother the way children do, and I saw her too late and I could not." The fire was all ready. He stopped. For a long moment, he could not go on at all. "I have sent men to their deaths in war and slept soundly. I told myself that was the price of a throne. But she was reaching for me. She had got separated from her mother in the smoke, and she reached for me across the street because I was the largest thing in it, and children believe the largest thing will keep them safe. I could not reach her in time." His shoulders bowed. "Her name was Nuri. Her mother was lost in the same fire, trying to reach her. Before she died, she looked at me, and she did not curse me with magic. She did not need to. She only said, 'You could have stopped this. A true king would have seen us. This is on your hands.' And then the priestess of their dead temple, with her last breath, gave those words, 'Teeth.' Every night," she said, "the dead will gather to you, and you will burn among them, and you will not rest until you have paid a debt that cannot be paid." He bowed his head. "And every night since, I have. And every night the child reaches for me, and every night I am too late, and I will be too late forever, because that is what forever is for." "Tal," Lyra said softly, "that is not a debt. That is a wound, and someone has poured poison into it every night for a year, so it can never close." Orissa, who had come silently to the doorway, spoke then. "She is right. And it is worse than she knows." The old woman came forward. "I have studied this curse. It is not strong. It should have guttered out within a season, the way such spite usually does. Curses of grief need fuel, and the fuel is belief. They live only as long as the cursed agrees with them." Her sharp eyes fixed on the emperor. "It is still burning, after a year, because every night you tell it that it is right. You are not its prisoner, Talazar. You are its keeper. You hold the door shut from the inside, because you believe you deserve to be in there." The emperor said nothing, but Leora, through the half-open bond, felt the thing she dreaded most, And it was not denial, it was agreement. Orissa turned to Leora and her voice gentled in a way Leora had never heard from her. And you, child, you are dying too. The bond pulls you both, and a bond half made cannot be carried at this distance without killing the one who carries it deepest. If he goes into that fire and does not come out, you will follow him. So will the child. She let it land. You could leave tonight, ride from here, and let the bond fade slow, instead of breaking sharp. And live, I am old enough to tell you plainly that no one would blame you. You have given more to this man than anyone ever gave to you. Leora looked at the bowed dark head of the demon emperor, the most feared creature in the world, holding the door of his own torment shut, because he believed he belonged behind it. And she thought of every year she had spent making herself small, agreeing with the world that she did not deserve to take up room. "No," she said. Her voice was hoarse, but it did not shake. "I have spent my whole life leaving room so other people would be comfortable. I am done." She pushed herself upright in the bed. "He thinks he deserves to burn. I know exactly what that feels like, Orissa. I have felt it every day since I was old enough to understand I had been left. And there is only one thing in this world that ever pulls a person out of a room like that." She met the old woman's eyes, someone who refuses to let them stay in it alone. And far in the night, beyond the walls, on the cold road south, Dristan of Tavenmore reined in his horse, looked back at the black towers of Carith, burning faint against the dark, and sent word to the host he had already massed at the border, the envoy a pretext to bring his whole strength down upon Carith before it could draw breath. Davrin found her at dawn, which told her everything, because Davrin did not come to people. People were brought to Davrin. "He has barred his door," the commander said without preamble, leaning in the frame of her chamber with his arms folded and his clever tired eyes on her face. "He has not slept. He is burning through the nights to keep you out of the fire, and he means to keep doing it until it kills him, because he has decided that is nobler than letting you risk yourself. It is the single stupidest act of love I have witnessed in 40 years of soldiering, and I have witnessed many." He pushed off the frame. "I can get you to his door. I cannot make him open it. That part is yours." "Why are you helping me?" Leora asked, rising, already reaching for her shawl. "You barely know me, because I have watched that man die for a year," Davrin said simply, "and you are the only thing that has ever made him want to live. I am his oldest friend. I would let in worse than a wolf woman, if she could do that." A corner of his mouth moved. "Also, you are the Emperor's mate, whether either of you has had the sense to say the word yet. The bond is plain to anyone with eyes. Now go, before I think better of treason." The corridors of Careth were silent and cold as Davrin led her up through the dark, and her heart climbed higher with every step. And when at last they came to the great doors, and Davrin melted away into the shadows with a soldier's tact, Leora stood alone before the chamber she had been sent from, and was afraid, and went in, anyway. He was at the window, fully dressed, the fire raging in him, and when he saw her, he came off the glass, like a man who had been struck. No. He backed away from her, actually, backed away. The most dangerous creature in the world, retreating from a sick and shaking wolf woman, as if she were the threat. "No, you cannot be here. It is not safe. The fire is high tonight. If you sleep near me, it will take you in. Leora, go, please." "No," said Leora and crossed the room. "You will die." His back met the wall. There was nowhere left for him to go. "You and the child. You will burn with me. I cannot. I will not have your deaths on my... Then, make me leave." She stopped before him, close enough now to feel the furnace of him, close enough to see the breath catch in his chest. "You are the demon emperor of Ashmar. You ended Vile in a night. If you truly want me gone, my lord, then put me out. Pick me up and carry me to the door and throw me into the corridor and bar it." She reached up slowly, giving him every chance to stop her, and laid her palm against his burning cheek and felt him shudder under her hand like a struck bell. Go on, make me go. He did not make her go. It is not the same, he said, low and desperate, his hand coming up to circle her wrist, but not, she noticed, to pull it away. Sending you off to live is not the same as throwing you to the sand. Dristan kept you to use you and discarded you when you cost him something. I am sending you off because I would rather you live a long life, far from me, than a short one in my arms. Do you not see the difference? It is the only honorable thing I have ever wanted to do. I see it, Leora said. It is still you deciding what I am allowed to risk. It is still a man looking at me and choosing for me whether I am worth keeping. She let her thumb move along the hard line of his cheekbone. I have had a lifetime of men deciding I was easier to give away than to fight for. I did not think the last one would be the one who actually loves me. His breath left him as though she had struck him. You knew, she whispered, about the bond, all this time. Of course I knew. It came out of him torn. His hand rose and covered hers, and pressed it harder to his face. Helpless. How could I not? I smell you in every corridor of this place. I wake, reaching for a woman who is 3 wings away, and breaking her body to stay there, because I am too much a coward to either keep you or let you truly go. I have wanted you since you stood in the sand and told a demon to be quick about it and leave your child be. His voice dropped to nothing. You have ruined every kind of peace I had, the fire I could bear. This I cannot. I lie awake and I do not even think of the curse. I think of the way you talk yourself to sleep. I think of the milk going cold on the hearth, because you are not here to drink it. I have burned for a year, and told myself I felt nothing, and you walked out of a desert and taught me, in a handful of nights, exactly how much I had left to lose. Then stop trying to lose it, Leora said, and her own eyes were stinging now. I crossed the room for the child. I am not going to walk away from the both of you to spare you the inconvenience of being loved. Leora rose onto her toes and kissed him. He went, still for one heartbeat, as though he could not believe it, and then a sound broke out of him, and he was kissing her back, his hands rising to cradle her face, as if she might shatter, as if she were the one made of fire, and he, the one afraid of burning. The heat of him wrapped all the way around her, no longer scorching, only warm, only home, and the pull in her bones that she had fought for weeks rose up singing, and she stopped, at last, fighting it. If you stay, he murmured against her mouth, I do not think I will be able to send you away again, ever. Do you understand what I am telling you? Yes, she said. I am counting on it. Say it once more, he breathed. I have spent a year being told what I deserve. Tell me you choose this. Tell me, and I will never doubt it again. I choose you, Leora said against his mouth. I choose you, and the fire, and the burning city, and every ghost in it. I am not afraid of the dark places. I have lived in one my whole life. I would rather walk into yours than live alone in mine. She felt him break, gently, at that. Felt the last of his terrible control give way. Now stop arguing with me, Tal. I have wanted this since the desert too, and I am very, very tired of being noble. He drew her into his arms then, and held her as though he meant to make up for every year either of them had spent cold and alone. And when at the last the bond rose to seal itself, it was not teeth the way the wolf stories told it, and not fire the way she had feared. It was both. His mouth found the place where her shoulder met her throat and rested there, and a warmth bloomed under her skin that did not hurt, a mark of soft ember that would never burn her, and her own wolf rose up from wherever she had been hiding her whole quiet life and answered it, marking him in return. And the bond snapped shut between them like a key, turning in a lock that had waited a lifetime to be opened. She felt him pour into her through it, all of him, the grief and the guilt, and beneath it, impossibly, joy. She gave him back everything she had spent her life believing she was not allowed to give. For a while there was no emperor and no foundling, no curse and no crown, only the two of them and the third small warm heartbeat between them, sealed now into something the world could not undo. Afterward he gathered her against his chest, and she felt him sink toward sleep with a completeness she had never felt in him. His breathing going deep and slow and unguarded, his fire dimmed to the softest glow. "Stay," he murmured, already half gone. "I am not going anywhere," she told him, and meant it with everything she was. For a long while she lay awake just to feel it. The rise and fall of him, the new warm thread of the bond running between her heart and his, so that she could feel, faint and astonishing, the contentment moving through him in his sleep. She had spent her whole life on the outside of every warm room, watching other people be wanted through the window. She lay now inside the warmest room in the world, and the door was hers, and no one was going to make her leave it. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to the child, laying her hand over the small warm weight of it. "We are staying. We finally found somewhere worth staying." The child stirred under her palm, a slow, lazy roll, and at the very same moment, Talazar's quiet fire glowed once in answer, warm and gold, the two of them reaching for each other even in sleep, and Leora felt her throat close with a joy almost too large to hold. She had been thrown away as worthless. She had crossed a desert that should have killed her, and a citadel full of fear, and a man's bone-deep certainty that he deserved to suffer, and she had given him this peace. True peace, the first he had known in a year, the child, safe between them and the bond sealed, and the future, for the first time in her entire life, bright and wide and full of doors that opened. Tomorrow there would be a war coming down from the north. Tomorrow there would be Dristan, and the war he would bring, and all the hard cost of having something at last worth defending. But tomorrow could wait. Tonight she had a sleeping demon's heart steady beneath her ear, and a warm child beneath her hand, and a warmth around her that asked nothing of her but that she stay. She let her eyes drift closed, his heart slow and even against her cheek. She woke, surrounded by burning. This time, there was no slipping into it gently. This time the emberfold took her whole, and Leora opened her eyes, already standing in the burning street, with the silent flames roaring on every side, and the gray ash falling like snow. She understood at once that this was different. Every other time she had come here, she had been a visitor, half a dream, able to wrench herself free with a single pull. Now she was here entirely, body and bond, and the warm weight of the child. And she knew with cold certainty that the union had not freed him from this place. It had brought her all the way into him. "This was never a nightmare," she said aloud, and her voice did not fall flat this time. It carried. The flames leaned toward the sound of it. "This is a prison. A cage built for one man, to break him a little more, every single night, forever." She found him at the heart of it, in the place where the fire burned highest and made no sound, and the sight of him stopped her breath. The demon emperor of Ashmar was on his knees in the ash, diminished in a way she had not known a person could be, stripped of every terrible thing that made him himself, no fire in his eyes now, only a man kneeling in the ruin of a city, watching the dead. And the dead were watching him. They stood in the flames, and did not burn, a great silent crowd of them, men and women and the old and the young, all the people of Vielle, their faces turned to the one who had failed them. And from among them, small and grave and certain, the child came forward, Nuri, dark hair, dark eyes, one hand reaching, just as she had reached for him in the smoke when he could not reach her. Leora dropped to her knees beside him in the ash. Tal, look at me, please." He did not. His eyes were fixed on the child. "I cannot leave," he said, and his voice was the smallest she had ever heard it. "I have tried. There is no out. There has never been an out. There is only this, and I deserve this. And you should not be here to see it." The child Nuri opened her mouth, and what came out was soft and patient and almost kind, which made it so much worse. You could have saved me, she said in a voice far too old for so small a body. You saw me too late because you were not looking. A true king would have been looking. All of this is your hand. All of this is your fault. Stay. Stay with us. Stay until you have paid. Yes, whispered Talazar and bowed his head. And the fire climbed higher around him. Fed and Leora, kneeling in the ash, understood the whole shape of it at last. Those are not her words, she said. The realization went through her like cold water. Tal, listen to me. A child of 6 does not speak like a magistrate. Those are not Nuri's words. They are yours. The curse took your own guilt and gave it her mouth. Because it knew you would never argue with her. She took his face in both her hands and turned it, by force, away from the ghost and toward herself. It does not keep you here. You keep yourself here. You hold the door shut from the inside, every night. Because somewhere in you, you believe every word that little girl is saying. And as long as you agree with it, it will never, ever end. His eyes met hers, raw and scoured down to nothing, and she saw that he could not yet let it go. I should have seen her, he said brokenly. She was reaching for me. I know. Leora's own eyes were streaming now, the ash sticking to the wet of her face. I know, my love. It was the worst thing in the world, and it was not yours alone to stop. You went to war because men with knives left you no other road. And in the dark and the fire and the chaos, a child ran where no one could have reached her in time, and that is not a failing of yours. That is the cruelty of war, and it is a wound, and you are allowed to carry a wound without calling it a sentence. She pressed her brow to his. I know how this feels. I know it better than anyone alive. I spent 24 years believing I was left on the castle steps, because something in me deserved leaving, that if I had only been better, smaller, more useful, my own blood would have kept me. I agreed with the people who threw me away, every day, for my whole life, until a monster picked me up out of the sand and held me like I was worth something. Her voice broke. We are the same, you and I. We have both been holding a door shut on ourselves. And I am so tired, Tal. I am so tired of us deciding we deserve to be left in the dark. The child Nuri had gone still. The whole burning city had gone still, listening. You are allowed to remember her, Leora said, turning at last to face the small grave ghost, taking the Emperor's hand and gripping it hard. You are allowed to grieve her every day of your life, but you are also allowed to live. And so is she. Look at her, Tal. Really look. She is not here to make you pay. She has been trapped in your fire for a year. Because you will not let her go any more than you will let yourself. She drew a shaking breath. Let her rest. Let them all rest. You are allowed to put this down. For a long moment, nothing happened. The fire hung in the air, the ash hung in the air, the whole terrible weight of a year hung between them. Then Talazar's fingers tightened around hers, and he looked at the child, truly looked at her, and the thing in his face was no longer agreement. It was grief, clean and enormous, and finally, his own. I am sorry, Nuri, he said. I am sorry I was too late. I am sorry for you and your mother and every soul in this city that I could not save. His voice steadied. You are not a debt. You never were. You were a little girl, and you should have grown up, and I will carry that for the rest of my life. But I am not going to burn for it anymore, and neither are you. The child Nuri looked at him with her grave, dark eyes. And then, slowly, impossibly, she smiled. The way a child smiles when she is finally allowed to go home. The reaching hand lowered. She closed her eyes. She was gone. And one by one the dead of Vale turned away and dissolved into the falling ash like breath into cold air, and as they went, the fire began, at last, to die, guttering and sinking until there was nothing left of the burning city at all, only the two of them kneeling together in a wide and quiet emptiness, holding on. Talazar fell forward into her arms, and Leora caught him, and held him as the year of grief he had locked away finally broke open and poured out of him in great silent shudders. I have you, she whispered into his hair. I have you. You can put it down. Now I have you. Leora woke in his bed with the gray light of true morning at the window, and the first thing she understood was that the room was not warm. The constant furnace of him was gone. Talazar lay beside her with damp eyes, and a face wiped clean of something she had never seen lifted before, breathing the slow, even breath of a man who had finally, fully rested. It is gone, he said, wondering, his hand finding hers. The fire, the weight of it. For the first time since Vielle, I cannot feel it at all. He looked at her as if she had hung the sky. You walked into the worst place in the world and carried me out of it. We carried each other, Leora said, and kissed him. And for one perfect moment, the future was nothing but light. Then the war horns sounded on the walls of Kareth. Davern was at the door an instant later, armored and grim. The wolf host is at the gates. Dreisten brought his whole strength down on us in the night. He means to take the citadel and the child by force. His clever eyes caught, for half a heartbeat, on the new ease in the Emperor's face. Though I will say you choose your mornings, the two of you. The demon emperor rose from the bed, and for the first time in a year, he rose with all of himself, no fire eating him from within, no exhaustion dragging at his bones, every terrible ounce of the power the world had walled itself against, finally, his alone, to command. Stay with Orisa, he told Leora, cradling her face. But Leora was already pulling on her shawl. No, I have spent my whole life letting other people decide my battles. I am coming to the gates. I want the man who left me to die in the sand to see exactly what he threw away. So, when Dreisten of Tavenmore stood before the black gates of Kareth, certain the cursed emperor was a hollow dying thing, he could topple. The gates opened, and what came out was not a dying thing at all. Talazar walked into the dawn hole, and rested and wreathed in a fire that no longer consumed him, but answered him, and at his side walked the cast-off Luna, and the child Dreisten had condemned. Leora watched the certainty drain from his golden face as he understood, far too late, that the woman he had thrown to the desert had been the one precious thing in his keeping, and that he had handed her to the one enemy strong enough to make him pay for it. You came for a child, you called a curse, Leora said, and her voice rang clear across the silent host. The seers told you she would burn your house to the ground. They were right, Dreisten. Just not the way you feared. She laid a hand over her belly. Warm and sure. Your house was already ash. You burned it yourself. The day you decided a person could be thrown away. All she will do is outlive it. What followed did not take long. A demon emperor in the fullness of his power, defending his mate and his child, was not a battle so much as a reckoning. Dristan's host broke and scattered against the walls of Kareth, and Dristan himself did not ride away, and Golden Severine was last seen fleeing north alone into a country that no longer had any use for either of them. By the time the sun stood clear of the dunes, it was over. The curse did not undo a year of grief in a single dawn. Healing did not work that way, and Leora, who had her own long undoing to attend to, would not have trusted it if it had. There were still hard nights. Nights Talazar woke with Vielle in his eyes, and on those nights Leora did not try to argue it away. She only held him and reminded him in the dark that remembering was not the same as deserving to burn. Season by season, the hard nights grew fewer, and he learned to speak of the dead without drowning in them. He had a remembrance built in the eastern garden, a quiet place of water and white stone, and there he lit a lamp for a child named Nuri that was never allowed to go out. A lamp was not a fire, he said. A lamp was something you tended because you chose to, in the light, and not because it was eating you alive. The court of Kareth did not know what to do with a foundling wolf for an empress, and the whispers followed her down the black corridors for a long while. But Talazar wore the bond mark at his throat, where the whole world could see it, and set her at his right hand in every hall. And when a southern lord once let his disdain show too plainly, the emperor only smiled, and said that any man who thought a woman who had walked through his curse was beneath the throne was welcome to go and try the walk himself. The whispers, in time, ran out of breath. Their daughter was born, as the first rains broke the long heat, small and warm and furious, with her mother's stubborn jaw and eyes that held, even in the cradle, the faintest banked glow of a fire that would never once be turned against her. They named her Selah. Davern wept and pretended fiercely that he had not. Orissa held the child against her old chest and laughed, for the first time in anyone's memory, and said only, "The wrong thing to be afraid of, all along." And on an ordinary morning, a year on, Leora woke slowly to pale light through the curtains and the warm weight of her family around her, the child drowsing between them, the Emperor still deep in the kind of sleep that asked nothing of him but that he stay. No fire, no ash, no burning city, waiting beyond the dark. She had been left in the sand to die, unwanted, certain to the marrow that she did not deserve a single thing the world might give her. She lay now in the warmest room she had ever known, with the door safely hers, and understood at last that she had always been allowed to take up room in it. She settled back against the slow, steady heartbeat of the man who had found her at sunset, drew her sleeping daughter closer, and let her eyes drift shut. They slept.